Okay, thank you for coming. We'll call the meeting to order at 7:30. If you would like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, well, Audrey's not here. We need to do the roll call.
Sure.
Okay.
Roll call of officers. Merlo,
Here.
Gary, here. Fernandez, excused. Lewandowski,
Here.
McLaughlin,
Here.
Hahn,
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? The motion passes. Public comment. For a public comment today, because we have a public hearing, if you would like to speak on the show stack development, if you could save your comment until the public hearing, that would be great, so we'll keep it all together. And anything that is outside the show stack, for a public comment, if you would like to state that now, please come forward and state your name. No public comment. Okay. There's Salem Realty. Okay. New business items. Okay, we have a motion to open.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing on 14-002 Salem Springs at 7:33.
All those in,
I'll second motion.
all those in favor of opening the public hearing 14-002 Salem Springs 7:33, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? The public hearing is open. So we're going to start our public hearing, and we'll hear first from our planner, who will give an overview of what we're looking at and why we're having this public hearing.
Okay, so this is a development proposal for a residential subdivision, residential condominium development in south of M14, but surrounded by Godfredson, Joy Road, and Napier Road. This has been in front of you a number of times, and most recently, last month, you had the preliminary site plan in front of you. The PUD area plan for this site, PUD resolution, was originally approved for this a couple of years ago, and has since had an extension in order to continue working forward on a preliminary plan. The preliminary plan that was presented to you, as you recognized last time, we determined that there were some changes, and you determined those changes were major changes. So what that requires then is for you to hold a public hearing and make a determination on these changes. So you basically go back to that same process that you had when you originally saw this PUD as a rezone. And ultimately what you'll be doing is making a recommendation to the board based on the findings for this development. So ultimately, if you do recommend an approval and the board does approve this area plan, this will set the PUD zoning for the site and allow the applicant to then come back with the preliminary site plan to continue to move forward with this new proposed layout and design. That's different from what was previously approved, obviously based on the discussion we had last time and the findings that you made last just real briefly, I won't go back into all the details of the site plan, but I will update you on the changes that have been made since what you saw last. So obviously, the major changes that were identified last time were the removal of the southern access point, as well as the removal of the recreation facilities or the clubhouses and the pools. There were originally two. The first preliminary site plan that we saw then had one, and we worked with the applicant and, through a very good process, kind of amended some of the layout of the site, tried to make it work a little bit better with some of the circulation issues, and actually suggested that usable open space might be more of a viable use and more of an important use to a neighborhood like this than what they were proposing with the pools, because that may not serve all of the residents of the neighborhood, whereas open space and preservation of natural features would do that. So I know that when we last saw this, there was some concern about the wooded area, the large stand of mature trees that's just south of the Edison easement. Since the last application, the applicant has actually made some efforts to pull those couple of cul-de-sacs that were pushed into that area down. So you'll see that that area is now, by and large, preserved. The lots at the very south end of that do push into that, but the applicant has explained that they will try to preserve those through the individual home development anyhow, but substantially that area has been preserved. We think it's a great addition or amendment to the plan that we most recently saw. In addition, the pathway is now outside of the Edison easement, so it's completely within the woods, and we think that's a great improvement as well. You talked about enlarging the parkland south of the county drain. It's closer to the 70-foot lot area. They did pull one of those units out of there, so there's more frontage along the road for that park area. They did replace one of the lots that they lost up along the northeast portion of the site, close to the pond and the most northerly access point onto Napier Road. So they were able to maintain that 558 unit count that they have been presenting this entire time. And then there was a 66-foot easement on the northwest side of the site that now has a couple of additional lots over the top of it. It didn't look like it was ever going to be possible to get a road through there, but what we're really focused on is this outlot that's represented on lot number 75, and believe that there is a better opportunity to provide access to the site through that area. We have been presented with some conversation and bullet points from the fire chief. And while many of those items are really detailed items that we feel should be handled and could be handled during the preliminary site plan, one of the major concerns that the fire chief has enumerated is that there's no north or south access to the site. And based on their experience with fires, especially in subdivisions like this, they want to have the possibility to have all access from all sides. So they've indicated, and we think that that's an appropriate thing to deal with here in the preliminary or in the area plan phase, a need for an additional access point from the south end. In addition, you have seen in your packets a report from the Washtenaw County Road Commission, who has seen the transportation traffic impact study. And while they do agree with the trip generation in terms of numbers, they still have some concerns about the distribution. And so in their report, they put forth a number of things that they'd like to work with the applicant on. I think ultimately they are recommending a southern access point as well. We would suggest then that, if you do move forward with an approval here, you make some recommendation in terms of a southern access point, but allow the developer to work with the road agencies, whether that be Wayne County or Washtenaw County, as well as MDOT, who has some involvement in this as well because of the proximity to their on-ramps, through the site planning process to ensure that all those things are taken care of, and ultimately they put together a road improvement agreement. So that's kind of the new information that we have in terms of changes to the layout, the information that's been provided to us from outside agencies at this point. Like I said, ultimately this evening, we're not doing a site plan approval, but what you'd be looking at is the amendment to the area plan, the amendment to the PUD rezoning, and making a recommendation to the board. I put together a draft resolution for you all. There are, I believe, 11 findings that the zoning ordinance requires you to make or suggests that you make as you review this. What I would suggest, though, is that we go ahead and go forward with the public hearing, hear from the public, hear from the applicant, and then when you get into your discussion, I can walk you through those findings, our suggestions. Ultimately, you'll all want to agree to these findings or come to your own conclusions and amend this as you see fit. We have some recommendations in that resolution in terms of conditions that you would suggest that the board may place on the rezoning. So you can add or detract those as you see fit as well. So this is ultimately a draft for you, but you'll want to go through those as part of your deliberation. And like I said, I'm happy to walk you through that and I'll answer any questions.
Paul, on the road commission, talking about recommending access to Joy Road on the southern end of the project. Where do we stand with that with the road commission? I mean, can they say that we should have that, or is that, I mean, that's something that's real important to all the planners, I know, at least that we've talked about in the past.
So I know that in the past, the planning commission has talked about that and said that there's a need for it. I think there's support from public safety as well.
Right.
The road commission is recommending it at this point. They do have other requirements in terms of updating the traffic study to show a redistribution of trips. So ultimately, whether it's a Joy Road or whether it's the original access point that they showed coming down to Ann Arbor Road, it really depends on how the applicant works through this process with the road commission and what the ultimate improvements are. Once they agree to the premise of the traffic impact study, then they will determine what kinds of improvements are necessary, whether those are lights or turn lanes or center turn lanes or tapers or what have you. But that's kind of the next step after they work through these issues that they identified in the report.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now let's move to the public. If you would like, if you have a comment, I think you would come up to the microphone and state your name and your address, and if you have a contribution.
This would be public comments for the Shostak.
For the show staff, yep, for the plan. So if you'd like to come up to the microphone and,
Good evening, Robert Rizzo. I guess what I'm going to say is a couple of things. That area is zoned for what's proposed. I would be in favor of seeing that. Reason being, these are homes, I mean, a lot of people want to move out to Salem Township, and maybe not all of them can afford to buy a estate on acreage. And this gives them an opportunity to smaller lot sizes, condominiums, townhouses. It gives them an opportunity to come out to this area. Also, I saw Shostak. I lived in an area in Livonia where I seen a development they did at Plymouth Road in Middle Belt called Wonderland. And there were homes back on Orange Lawn that butted up to the south end of the development. And they did a really nice job building berms, putting in green belts, and they did a wonderful job, beautiful retention pond there on Plymouth Road with stone and fountains so the water wasn't stagnant. And I was pretty impressed with that. And the only other thing I could say is if Mr. Hill's conservation issues are legit, then I would hope that Shostak would address them. And I hope the development continues on, and I'd like to see it. Thank you.
And I was gonna say that, you know, we didn't know what kind of crowd, if it was gonna be really busy, and we were gonna have a 3-minute timeline, but since there are so few people, I don't think that's necessary.
So I can talk for a half hour now? You know, Roger Heitman, I'm at 5303 Napier, and I did notice the addition of the south entrance. It seems like everybody's recommending that needs to be there. My concern with that is it should come with the stipulation that the developer needs to pave that area. That was a requirement for right across the street from the township. They put in detached condos over there. The developer had to pave Napier Road. So I think that should be part of it right there. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Carl Schaefer, 5265 Napier. In any of these plans, I haven't seen anything that goes according to your master plan that says the existing residents have to be accommodated or whatever with things. Now, I've got 500 feet of frontage that's gonna go on against their property. And they have regulated a 50-foot berm instead of the 100-foot that goes around all the rest of the places. And with that many houses, at your recommendation or their recommendation, they were 10 feet apart, the houses. That's gonna be pretty crowded along there. And we don't need a development that size. We need about half that. And I think that'd be a really nice development. The way it is right now, I think it's just gonna be, you might as well have apartments. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Mrs. Hamilton.
I'm gonna speak from here because I'm gonna read. The growth management plan says, based upon environmental factors and the density of potential land uses within the urban services district, public sewer service would be necessary concurrent with development at an intensity or density sufficient to require such service. I've raised this issue every time we have a public hearing on this matter. It doesn't say after, it says concurrent with. And I kind of am concerned about how far you go down the path with Shostak before you have a plan in which you're providing public water and sewer. The growth management plan is very clear. I was raised in a family where vocabulary is extremely important, and the word concurrent means at the same time, not at some distant future point. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hill?
Mark Hill, Clement Farm, Napier Road. As you all well know, I'm not very happy with the proposals that are on the table at the moment. I asked at the last meeting of the trustees that we stood back and had a moratorium on it, so we could all discuss in a calm fashion all the things that we've learned over the previous year. I feel very strongly that we should be talking eyeball to eyeball, both as a community and as our representatives, our advisors, and SCOSTAC themselves. There's a number of issues that I'm extremely concerned about. One's just been raised earlier. I have a conservation historic farm. Like a lot of legislation that is drawn up in Michigan, The legislation is very contradictory. It is very confusing, and it doesn't address key issues. But one of the key issues is that any development that impacts my conservation baseline agreement can trigger off a number of actions, both at county, state, and federal level. The amount of upheaval that will be taking place in this massive development cannot do anything other than threaten the wetlands, both within the development and the wetlands on adjacent properties. We're only beginning now to really understand in this country how delicate the ecosystem of the wetlands is. It is very difficult in just doing bore testing the way it's been done to actually establish what could happen when you start doing a full development and paving those areas and building housing. Now, my key concern is that there's not been enough investigation. What has been done is an ability by all parties to tick boxes and say, I've done my job, it's someone else's responsibility. I want to get these environmental issues on the table, properly discussed and explored by all parties to make sure it doesn't bite us all in the backside later on. If I get ignored and humoured, I have no alternative in law but to protect myself. Because if my conservation easement gets screwed up, federal authorities will kick into gear. And in particular, the revenue services will be looking to recover their monies that they paid to create the conservation easement. Now we can argue till the cows come home whether this will stand up in court. And it's a bit like locker room talk. My lawyer's bigger than your lawyer. My lawyer knows more. I actually come from a family of lawyers, so the last thing I want is to go to law. I believe very much in looking my adversaries in the eyes, because they may not be my adversaries, may have more in common than we realise. Because the one thing a developer wants is certainty. And that's the one thing they don't get in Michigan. It's Russian roulette. We as a township are going in the right direction by adopting new standards and make it clearer, the work on the new sewers, etc. with Stantec. They're a very good example of giving guidelines to developers what to do. I think we should be having standards for how you're working in wetlands. Within Michigan, we have some ridiculously pathetic legislation on setbacks and things in relation to wetlands. And one of the things you need to understand on wetlands is that you may see a wet patch there, but that isn't just where the wetlands is. It could be actually looking at the plans at the moment and knowing the topography of the site in question under someone's lounge in the new development. It is very difficult. We're also talking about removing, was it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in excess of 3,000 trees. How on earth can that not affect the land? It is going to have a major impact. And I can go into scientific reasons why, and etc., and I'm quite prepared to do so. But I just want to leave you with two things. One, if you rip the trees down, not only are you going to be changing the topography of, and the hydrology of the land in question, you're going to be destroying bat habitats. And I disagree with some of the communications, particularly from federal level, about the bats it's unfortunately one of the things I know a lot about. Funny enough, as a developer, when you take trees down, the colonies don't necessarily come back. They also, depending on the time of day, the month of the year, and the year in question, they use different parts of the site, the different trees, the different size trees, to hang around in. Now, one of the problems is that if you remove one, it can have a catastrophic impact on the colony. It may not come back. Now you may say, well, thank God they're not around. I don't like them, etc. But they have a major role to play in the control of species.
Mr. Hill?
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay. Well, can I just
Maybe
read
it's
the
number-
last page, the last thing?
Read an entire page?
No, it's just a section. You can.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
certainly, go ahead.
Right. Now, my site, my farm, is governed by a baseline agreement. It's a snapshot of when the farm was put into conservation. And every year I'm inspected against that conservation, that baseline agreement. Now, my baseline agreement says the property consists of gentle rolling hills, forested land and wetland habitat. It is near the western end of the meandering stream that flows eastward along the southern property boundary towards Napier Road. The farm fields have not been cultivated in recent years. The westernmost portion of the property includes a mature forest with many landmark-sized oak and hickory trees, many of which are likely 200 to 300 years old. Historical area photographs show that this portion of the property remains much the same as it was in earlier years. Significant portions of the property feature high-quality wetlands which are vital to the preservation of water quality in the Rouge River watershed. These wetlands provide critical habitat for a great variety of wetland-dependent species. And I can just go, I mean, there's pages of this, but that's what I just wanted to say. Now, I'm having development immediately adjacent to my property, within 50 feet. I've got trees that are of scientific importance adjacent to the boundary. These protections that are being proposed in here are not good enough. I don't want to be going out of here tonight and kicking off my lawyers to start World War III here. It is no benefit to anybody. But we've got to address these issues, because if I don't address these issues, I'm going to have the authorities down on me because I'm not protecting my property. I'm going to be turning to the conservation bodies to join in me to protect those bodies. Wetlands can be disrupted from the minute you actually put a bulldozer in close proximity. I want to talk, I want to try and get best practices together and move forward. I know Skostak are capable of doing it. I don't believe they're as bee-minded as some people make out to be. I have studied a lot of what they do. There's a lot I don't agree. I'm former Northville. We've clashed in the past, but I think we can learn our lessons. And I think, more importantly, I think we should be putting together, and I'll finish on this, Pam, so relax, something that we're all proud of. We're all proud of. And more important, that it's easier to syndicate, it's easier to finance, etc., and we can make money out of it. I don't want to battle, but I'm a hard-nosed purchasing boss from the car industry. I'm used to battles.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Thank you.
And I didn't mean to rush you, because what you have to say is certainly very important, and I'm sure everyone up here and out there appreciates it. I always do. Okay. Yes, sir.
I want to just read you something that's on your
Steve Crooker, 5255 Napier. This disaster is gonna be on two sides of me. Salem Township Planning Commission shall protect fragile lands, natural features, water resources, and the environmental safety of Salem Township. There's way too much density for that area. 3 entrances on Napier Road, that's way too much traffic. Not a road that dead ends at Territorial and turns to dirt. At Hanover Road, there's way too much traffic on a road that can't handle it. The entrances are across from the Pulte subdivisions now, that half those people don't stop at the stop signs anyway. You might as well park an ambulance and a fire truck and squad cars on that street if you're gonna put that much traffic out on there. I think you guys need to slow down and really think this through. That's not what Salem needs. This is a rural community, not Canton. You kick these guys off into this direction, and it's over. You might as well call it Canton. So once they get holds on everything, Salem's over. So I think you really need to think about this. Half of this, like Mr. Schaefer said, half of this development would be something to be proud of, not the density we got there. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment? Okay. Make a motion to close?
Yeah, make a motion to close public hearing.
Second motion.
8:02.
Okay, Bruce, was that you seconding it? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I think, that was your first and your
Yes.
second?
He's first.
He's second.
Your first,
He's second.
thank you.
Who's on third?
I have them fast.
I don't know. You got it. 8:02.
Thank you.
Okay, close 8:03. All those in favor of closing the public hearing at 8:03, say aye. Opposed? None? Okay, the public hearing is closed. And so now we will have our board discussion.
Questions from the board?
Okay. Carol, we'll start with you. Have some questions?
I'll wait till at the end,
Oh, okay.
please.
The new guy, Mr. Reed.
Well, I do see that they, shows they have addressed some of the changes towards what we're looking to see in the development. And I did hear there was a number of people that would like to see a smaller development, but I don't think we have that on the table tonight. In reference to Mr. Hill, there's no question that we're looking at a conceptual thing, but they must meet all requirements of your agreements in their development. And I would think that's going to be clear in anything that we do going forward. We can't control all the different aspects, whether it be road commission or state, federal, and what have you, but they have to comply with all of that. We're looking at a conceptual drawing right now on the development.
Can you educate me? One of my biggest concerns,
I know
sorry.
we're probably not at this time, okay? We have another public comment at the end, so you're
Okay.
welcome to ask a
it's to do
question
with the
there.
hardscaping. of the
Yeah,
line.
but you can ask that at the end, so write it down so you don't forget.
Okay, so I think that everything that's been brought up here is being taken care of through our planner right now, and making sure that we do our due diligence.
And if you have any questions for our planner
Well,
or
again,
the developer, now
I
is
did
the
have a
time.
question on the plan, and again, which was brought up, that number of accesses to Napier Road, and maybe that northern one not being as necessary. And then certainly, of course, having that southern access is very important, I think, to the development, which you've stated earlier. So I don't think there's any other cooperate with all these agencies and give them, the necessary public safety that we need in meeting the requirements for all the agencies, including federal and county and state.
I'm ready now.
You ready?
There's, for myself, it's the berm that Mr. Hill talks about. It's been talked about, I don't know how many times, but I never hear how the difference got changed, or how it was made to be 100 feet further west than it is east to 50 feet. The east, the berm between the properties and that. And as far as the intersection there, I can't see why it shouldn't be, because of the safety of people, the fire department coming in a lot further away to get at these places at the north end is a safety issue myself. But I don't know if I missed the boat on that, on the 50 feet versus 100 feet versus the 50. I never heard anything.
So, as I indicated during my initial report, this was a plan unit development that was approved 2 years ago. And during that process, the developer has the ability to ask for deviations based on the PUD ordinance in the zoning ordinance. They can ask for deviations from what those standards are. And so through that approval, that there were a whole list of deviations that are reiterated on this new area plan that you see. They were on the originally approved area plan drawing from December 14. And so that was one of those deviations that was previously approved and precipitated the layout generally that you see before you now.
Okay, thank you.
I think it was something that Rodney worked on. That,
Oh, okay.
and that's how that happened.
Are we responsible on our end regarding the federal, the money he got for not developing his property and his rules that he has to abide by?
I think to the extent that we ensure that through the site planning process, that they comply with local and any other state or federal standards that apply, we would need to recognize that through outside agency approvals. So if we ensure that, they're meeting the state and federal rules for any on-site development that they do, whether that be impacting wetlands and getting that approval from DEQ, whether that be meeting our local ordinances or engineering standards, that's where our responsibility as the township, as the community lies. Ideally, if they're meeting those standards, there should be no impact to the neighboring property. I think that the concern is that our standards don't go far enough to do those protections, but through the site planning process, it's our responsibility as planners, as planning commission members, to ensure that we're meeting with or receiving reports from those outside agencies saying that they have complied with the rules and regulations that are in place.
Thanks, Madam Chair. That's it.
Could you explain, I'm looking at the big map here and the requested deviations. B, the proposed deviations on the yard dimensions. I was looking specifically at the 70-foot lots and how that has changed. It says one side was 10, now it's 5.
Well, these are the same deviations.
Is,
Right.
yeah, I mean, is that,
Yeah, again, it's the same answer that I provided a moment ago. These were the deviations that were proposed and approved during the original PUD.
Last time.
Yep.
Can I just put
Sure.
an asterisk next to that? I think when we went through that, the reasoning to allow the homes to be closer with the side lots was with the
stipulation, understanding that there would be more open space area elsewhere. It was to allow houses to be, you know, compressed more, but allow for more developed, you know, I'll say open space and you know, play and recreational area for the development. And also to allow the, you know, really the preservation of some of the wildlife areas, less movement of wetlands. You know, they're allowed to, pretty much the way you look at it is, if you have so many acres of wetlands, when you're done, you better have so many acres of wetlands. You know, if you can move it, displace it, shift it to some degree. I don't think anyone would ever allow something to be completely filled in, a new one to be put someplace else. But that's how those came up. There's kind of, I really think there should be an asterisk next to that, and that's with the understanding that this is to provide more, you know, I'll say, recreational, open area and preserved area elsewhere. So there was some logic by it. It's scary looking at it. I don't like looking at it just the way it sits. Understand that, please. But it was with a push behind it for what the end result needed to be.
Art, did you have anything that you wanted to, any questions or concerns for the developer or the planner?
Couple, all the red paths, that sidewalk, walking, what is that right there?
It's a, you want me to address it, Paul?
Whatever, just so I know what what
The
legend was.
squiggly lines?
Yeah, just
There's
red.
sidewalks running throughout the entire development on both sides of the street. The squiggly lines are a trail system throughout the development, and will all tie into all the sidewalks along the street. So if someone wants to, you know, go for a nice walk through the nature, the existing woodlands, view some of the preserved wetlands and all the natural features, those are paths that they can go through.
Okay, so same, okay, so that's just a whole sidewalk system throughout this place?
The sidewalks are on the, in front of the houses, and on both sides of the road. The red squiggly lines that I think you're referring to were because there's so many natural features on the land, and we're preserving those natural features. We're building a pathway system through the woods so people can enjoy the natural features.
Okay, but not sidewalk, you're saying?
No, the sidewalks are on the roads in front of the house.
Just quick note, 120-foot Detroit Edison easement, that managed by ITC and those guys. I think that's actually 160 feet. It's 80 feet to either side of the power lines. I believe that's what it is.
Sure.
Gary Trussell with Roth and Clark. The easements as depicted are from the actual legal descriptions as recorded at Washtenaw County.
Up to date?
They are.
I believe you, I just, with all the stuff, a lot of people here in Salem just over the past, what was it, like 5 years ago? ITC came through here and basically, you know, right to whatever, good grief, it's all scar tissue now. It was 80 feet to, so I just, you know,
We have
probably check it, don't, I wouldn't necessarily say, just because it says it there, make sure, because otherwise these guys will literally come in and slice the back off of homes. I mean, you know, it would be a mess, so probably just recommend doing that first. Yeah, just my own general opinion, the Joy Road, yeah, I mean, I think it just plain needs to be done, but I think we should do diligence and, you know, build the facts, whatever the facts, whatever the data, whatever the analyses are that come to a conclusion of whether it's required or not, that's what we need to work with, you know. We all have emotions, we all have feelings, you know, a gut for what we think is right, but let's let the facts govern that one, unfortunately. The 66-foot easement, I'll call it the second one coming up there off of Goffredson Road, north of the existing plan. It just says 66 egress easement.
That land is owned by someone else, and the easement that we have for this land is only to provide access if a wastewater treatment plant is over in that vicinity and to access to serve the wastewater treatment plant. But we don't own the land, which is an easement.
Okay, that easement was there before you guys ever walked up?
Yeah, when
Okay,
we
that's
bought the
just-
land,
Okay.
right,
Okay,
because JCI was gonna build a wastewater treatment plant in that vicinity, as best as I recall. And the purpose of that easement was for them to access that plant.
intention for wastewater. I just noted it because it's going through a couple homes.
No,
And
we
probably
abandoned
keep
it, we
that.
don't need it, so.
Right, no, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so.
Understand.
And we can only use it for that purpose, and there's no wastewater treatment plants.
These homes, I mean, we got basically what, 3 detached and townhouse, right? And multiple types of lots, but 2 different types of dwellings, right?
There's basically 5 different products.
It is
You
5
have,
different.
You have some of those, the attached duplexes, a significant number of detached, and then you have 70-foot lots, 90-foot lots, and 110-foot lots.
And, I mean, I don't know if I'm overstepping a bounds here. Guesstimate, what do you think, going down the list, what one of these homes will sell for?
It's gonna be a very high-end development. The attached condos would probably be at the lower end, I would guess, what, 3s? Yeah, low 3s, and on up from there. The 110-foot lots will be very expensive homes.
We talking into 7 figures, or
Like
keep it in
7.
6?
On the 110?
Yeah,
it could be
750,
650,
yeah, between 650, 750. Obviously depends what they put inside the home, always adds.
I would not have asked this, and Mr. Rizzo, I mean no disrespect by this, but you said it gives an opportunity for people to come here to Salem that wouldn't otherwise be able to afford it, or, make it here, and so I said, geez, okay, because, youch. Okay, good for you. I mean, capitalism was something that makes America great, don't get me wrong here. But I know I couldn't buy one, so that's fine.
What did you say the condos were, in the low 300s?
Yeah, starting low 300s.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not $500,000, or
There's-
$1 million spread
There's
on
monthly
5
maintenance
acres.
fees, right? Lot rent?
Well, no, they're not renting the lots, they own the home.
Well, I mean, there's a monthly fee, I'm sure. Okay. All right, let me see here. Yeah, I certainly would like to revisit the berms, to understand that better. I think that may be something that we should just kind of due diligence with the environmental impact concerns that are here. And also, and Linda, if you could, I don't have it here with me, Linda, if you could hand that to me, the statement about the concurrent water and septic and everything that needs to be done. Guys, I'll equate that, it's something I tell my kids every time. I said, a good pilot never takes off unless he knows he can land. He doesn't, they don't always go from one airport and land at the same airport, they go from one to the other, and, a good pilot makes sure that thing's not closed, there's not a big gully at the end, that the lights are on, and if I were to just hazard to guess what the documentation there means to us, is we run down this path and we say, hey, we have, we say we like a plan, this is a great idea to start with, and then we find out, well, guess what, the wastewater can't handle this, and it can get into a big mess with, well, we were approved by the township was responsible to look at that and due diligence according to their documentation. We were satisfied with going ahead with what the township said, and I think that's a big, get your tail slammed in the door. So I think we should absolutely pay attention to that statement and how it reads very clearly. Mr. Hill, I'm not very well versed on this, but removal of 3,000 trees. If someone can show me where that is on this and, kind of just draw some, that'd be of great interest.
So within the preliminary plan, that we saw previously, they had some counts. Obviously, this area plan has changed slightly, so it will be a requirement for the developer to provide us calculations for tree removal, to demonstrate that they are meeting the requirements of the township ordinance for ultimate numbers of tree removal and mitigation if that's required. So we don't have the most accurate count right now because the area plan has changed. So ideally, we'll be using less than the number we saw previously due to the preservation.
Yeah, I saw the comments in here about its shift to save some, and it's great. I appreciate that handshake.
So ultimately, as part of the preliminary site plan, we'll need to see those updated calculations, and the applicant will have to demonstrate to us how they're meeting the tree preservation and protection requirements of the ordinance.
And then just, I'll just add my own personal comments here. I think if I were a kid in this neighborhood, if I were a 12-year-old that said, you got a bicycle, and mom and dad say, stay between Napier and Goffredson and Joy and the farm to the north, I'd probably have a hard time finding a place to play baseball. And you got a lot of street area, and I'll say not much, it doesn't seem like there's much, I'll say alleyway area. Does that make sense? I mean, I see a lot of these developments going in where the backs of the houses are spaced more, and a kid can run out the back door of his house, and another kid runs out the back door of his house, and they meet in between, and moms are, in the kitchens, and dads are out on the deck or something, and they're all watching these kids play in the central area. I think that's something that is special to growing up, having that place to go. I love the paths going through there. That's great. But I think in the way of open space, just to give these kids a place to say, yeah, that's where I used to play when I was 12. That's where I used to ride my bike. And I see this, at least my initial impression, you can certainly call me out and tell me I'm wrong and show me something different, is that the kids will be on the streets, and you got a lot of traffic coming through there. So, I mean,
Actually, just to the contrary.
Okay.
We designed based on those comments you just made.
Did you? Okay.
Every house has a sidewalk in front of it. If you recall, that's a recent phenomenon that's come back. A lot of developments in the 70s and 80s and early 90s got rid of the sidewalks. They had longer front yards, but people were going trick-or-treating by walking in the street. We have sidewalks on both sides of the street that interconnect to the trailway. So it provides that connectivity that you're talking about.
Gives them that place to go.
As far as the lots, running out the back door, again, that's how I grew up too, albeit on a 50-foot lot. But these lots are, some are more than double that amount, and all of them are bigger than, they're 70, 90s, and 110s. The house is only on a small portion of that. The kids are gonna be running out their back door to play with their neighbors. It provides exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I see
The
that
baseball
up here in
field's
the
not
detached-
there.
In the detached condo.
Yeah,
Well,
the baseball field's
maybe
not there, but everything else is.
90 by 130, the house certainly isn't that big, at least I don't think so.
The attached and detached condos appeal more to the empty nester. The attached more to the young empty nester, the detached more to the empty nester whose children have grown up and moved out. What you're referring to as the kids, they're gonna live in those houses on the south side of the ITC easement corridor.
Okay. So if we're, no, I mean, I don't think there's anything in our ordinance that says thou shalt have a clubhouse and a pool, but if you're telling me these are, retired empty nesters, holy smokes, I'd give them a clubhouse. I'd give them an indoor pool and say, come on guys, and have aerobics on every other day or
Actually,
whatever.
we've had that discussion with the planners. And we realize that today's both families and empty nesters are more active in like doing the pathways and walking the trails and things of that nature, as opposed to a clubhouse just sitting around the pool.
Every retiree you get in here is probably one less person that's wanting to use that exit in the morning. Just remember that. And then guys, just a reminder, I mean, as we look at this, we're saying 558 total units, houses, dwellings, addresses, whatever you say. That's not necessarily 558 vehicles. I would imagine most of these are gonna be dual income. You know, it's gonna be mom and dad both leaving the house at the same time, one guy going and dropping off daycare, another guy, another one going and heading straight to work. So it's, I would not doubt if this is, 1.6 vehicles per dwelling, or something like that, between the magic hours of, 7:15 and 8:30 or something like that. So as we see traffic studies, I will immediately call that out if we just sit there and say it's 558. I'm sure they have some sort of variable they put in, but it's not gonna be, and someone have a hard time convincing me that if it's gonna be one person, one car per household, it's not gonna happen.
So they have provided a traffic impact study, and I don't know the exact number of trips, because they're distributed different times of the day, but it is not just 558. And the road commission in their report did indicate that they agreed to the trip generation numbers, so that traffic engineers have a standard number that they use. We've been looking at these residential developments for quite some time, so that they have standards that they use for different types of dwellings, residential units, et cetera, and so they have agreed to the number that the applicant has presented in terms of the trip generation. What they're still working on is the distribution.
And lastly, just be a comment, and unfortunately it is in Canton, but it's just by coincidence only. I had the opportunity to go into, oh my goodness, now I'm gonna forget what it's called, Cherry Hill, tell me out guys. Cherry Hill Village? Just Cherry Hill Village? Okay, right there, Ridge and Cherry Hill Road. And I was there on Halloween, was there with my kids had friends there, so we were over there in that neighborhood going through. And I don't know, they called the engineer me, but I actually sat there, and here we are at basically 5:30 at night. And I literally noted how the traffic was moving through there and how it was moving slowly, and it really didn't, for some reason, it just didn't seem like there was that much traffic coming and going. Now, was it because people were home to hand out candy? Quite possibly. But the way the traffic moved in and out of there seemed really nice. The density of the homes there was almost deceiving, because if you're standing on the front step of one house, there was almost like, it was a really good chance that you were looking across a big open area to a neighbor's house that was, diagonal or straight across something, and I just looked at that, I said, it's higher density that I would prefer to live in, but for the way it was done, I thought it was really tasteful. And what I'd like to understand, and I'll probably just figure it out on my own run, how many residents were in there, and these are gonna be the dual income, both mom and dad working type of thing, and how many exits, egresses, whatever there are from that property, and just kind of do a ratio of that, kind of look at that and see, what's working, at least, from my own eyes. Let's see, anything else in here? Wow.
If you think of something, we can
Yeah,
always
I can
come
jump back,
to.
but
Okay.
I certainly want to revisit those berms. And I have this now written. I'm going to trust the source, wrote it down, copied it correctly. You could have just, taken a picture and sent me a text, but based upon environmental factors and the density of potential land uses within the urban services district, public sewer service would be necessary to concur with the development of intensity or density sufficient to require such service.
I think we'll move to Dan while you read that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That was all the rest.
Okay.
So, I'm good. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Dan.
Okay, first of all, I don't think you're gonna see any ball fields here. The type of customer that you have here is more on the older side. I think the trails and everything are a good idea because they will access those trails. The traffic stuff, I'm not so sure about. I leave that to the experts. Regards to setbacks, 2 years ago, I raised questions about cutting the requirements for setbacks. And the planner at that time had put together a package with all the changes and everything, and had said that they had reviewed all of this and they thought it was proper for those setbacks. And this board voted on it, and they passed that, so that was passed 2 years ago. I've got the notes of the people that lived in the area that had objections to it, so that was handled in a meeting 2 years ago. In regards to the mitigation of the trees, our ordinance says 1 for 1, irregardless of the foliage that's required by the subdivision itself. Is that not correct? 1 for 1?
No, I think it's more than that. But
I think it says 1 for 1, that's what I recall reading, so I could be wrong.
there's a scale that depends on the size of the tree.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, it's substantial.
Yes, and you're correct, it does not
So we're
count.
nowhere near anything like that here.
Well, and we're not,
I'm just, trying to question.
you're right, but at this point, we're not, we're at the area plan stage, so we're not dealing with those details per se, but it is certainly something to understand, and especially for the developer to understand that, those requirements will still be in existence when they get to that preliminary site plan phase. And yes, the required landscaping does not count towards mitigation.
Right. I think I agree with Bart on, I'm not clear on the berms and everything and what type of barriers that we have for the people living adjacent to this project. So that I'm not real clear about. Maybe you can enlighten me a little bit.
So there are requirements for what goes into those buffer areas. The berming may be something additional that you could require, especially in the areas where you've allowed for a reduction in the buffer size. That would be something we would look at when we get into the landscaping review of the site plan. But if that's something that you find is going to be necessary because of the reduction in setbacks, that would certainly be something we would look at.
I know that was concern of some of the homeowners in the area, property owners, as to what's going to separate them from the project with their property. And I think Mr. Rizzo made a good point about Livonia having adequate berms and whatnot, and
Yeah, because it backed right up to Orange along a residential street. Did a nice job with the green plantings there.
Can I just note something on that? I lived on the north side of Orange Lawn. I believe we're talking about the same development.
Yes.
We're talking between Stark and Plymouth Roads.
No, this is a
North side of
Middle
Orange
Belt, Middle Belt. and Plymouth.
Middle Belt? Okay, not the same one.
Not Stark.
All right.
Not Stark.
Forget I ever said a thing. No
Also,
problem.
Shostak Shostak did make an agreement to have limited delivery times for the trucks coming in that area for the commercial stuff.
I have a question. Oh, wait, is there, you guys have anything else? I know in this requested deviation, there was something about waiving all the ordinances for street lighting, but I know the last time we were discussing street lighting. So where's that gonna fall?
Well, it's the.
Is it something we have to talk about now, or is it
No,
something?
if you look at the notes, that's been modified, that at this point, and there might be need for a little bit of clarification here, because there's, as we pointed out earlier, there was a bit of contradiction in their notes. But what they did indicate, if you look at note 11, it does say that street lighting will be provided at all intersections and main entry roadways from Godfrey and Napier. I think that's a question that I actually raised in terms of need for, let's just clarify what these notes mean, okay? And also, I mean, they've always maintained that they will have photocell lighting on all the homes, but I thought that there needed to be some clarification of the notes that are actually, I guess, notes, where did I have it here? Note 11 and note 7. So I think that's just a That's still a point that needs to be clarified.
I think we did have some discussion about the safety factor might require additional lighting besides just at the street corners. And I think I have that someplace that we discussed.
I have a question. With the area plan, when we say make our recommendations to the board, but then obviously because this is just a general plan, more things are gonna come out of the woodwork, so to speak, in regards to utilities. They're gonna impact things.
Yeah.
So what are we, I guess I'll just look at the number of units. You know, we've heard the public say, too many units, too many units, too many units. So when utilities come through and whatnot, or the fire chief, you know, has, I don't know what his thoughts are or ideas on volume or of units. But when those things come down the road to cause a problem, how tied in are we to what we approve? I mean, everything gets corrected according to the requirements, right? Whether there's 550 units or the utilities come in or something with fire and safety and says, you know, water, sewer, all that stuff, say, well, this can't happen, so
Yeah.
that all sticks right there,
I mean,
right?
it's
It may
really
have to be adjusted and whatnot.
Yes, and there could be changes that will occur as more detailed plans are developed. Now, whether that affects a unit count, can't say that, you know, we don't know, you know. But this is why Paul indicated, for example, you know, the woodland mitigation, you know, we're gonna wanna see more specific plans in that regard. Certainly, there will be other reviews that will be required from engineering, planning, public safety, and environmental. But all those things come when you have more detailed review. So keep in mind that what we are really looking at tonight is an amendment to the zoning that was previously approved.
Sure.
Based on a concept, a plan that I think we've already, you know, provided our opinion. In our opinion, it provides a much better layout than what was, an improved layout, I shouldn't say that. There were improvements have been made.
I gotta add, and I mean, truly just going after discovery here. And I was certainly part of the commission that sat here and let that go through, but I don't remember ever thinking or asking about, you just mentioned fire, and at the same time you mentioned setbacks. And what I'm gonna ask here is, do we have any understanding as to how quick fire could spread with these houses being that much closer? Do we have any understanding of that? Because there's, specifications come from many different directions. And sometimes when you're reading a specification or a general design guideline or something like that, you never know where it comes from. You know, why is the rise and run of the stairs like this? Why is a pipe supposed to be this diameter? You never know. But there's a book and it tells you and you follow it because it's best practice. I'd be very interested to understand if we have two houses 30 some odd feet high and they're allowed to be, you know, 20 foot away from each other instead of 50 foot away from each other. Are we looking at the risk of fire spreading just that much quicker?
I think that question goes to the next step in the
Yeah.
preliminary.
Yeah, okay. I'm just,
Paul
you
did
know,
tell us that the
but I mean,
fire
it certainly
chief-
affects what they were designed to as well, so it's
Right.
part of their preliminary.
Right, and I'm sure the fire chief will give them some feedback and work with the planners.
I don't believe we've ever discussed that or
We
kicked
can
that one around.
purposefully talking to the fire chief about these issues. They've got some concerns about road widths, parking, turning radius to make sure that they can get their apparatus through, hydrant locations. So there, like I said earlier, there are a number of items that the fire chief has brought up in terms of details that he wants to see on the preliminary site plan. And as we go through that preliminary site plan process, we will certainly work with them and make sure that we do those things. With proximity of buildings, you know, there are building code issues, fire ratings for walls, you know, if it gets to a certain point, there's sprinkler issues. So there number of things that are really detailed site plan issues that we will bring fire chief in on. But as Dick said a moment ago, we're really working on kind of a layout, a larger picture zoning issue.
Thanks for
I
bringing
just,
me back in.
If I could mention one of those.
Just a point of clarification, no big question or anything, but there's been a lot of discussion in a number of units. And Steve, do you recall the original request for the number of units? Because it's been reduced since that time because of, you know.
Yeah, we ultimately got to 558, yeah.
Yeah,
I think
right,
it was
'cause it
like
started out like-
587 maybe?
Yeah.
578.
I had those figures written down, I didn't bring them with me, and I just want to make a point that as changes have been made, sometimes it's had an impact on the count, what's my other point that I wanted to make on this?
And then you guys put
Basically
into
that
a requirement that if there are any changes, we can't exceed
That's the
558.
other point I was gonna make.
Yes,
There
you
is,
put that-
there is a ceiling,
Yes.
but
It started
numbers
with
can
more.
change below the ceiling, not as an action to try to reduce units, but because of other ancillary situations that might evolve, you know, and that people would maybe say this is a little better to go this way or that way.
But we can't exceed the 558.
Right, okay, yeah, that's, okay, so I just a point of clarification is all I wanted to do, because a lot of people are questioning that.
Mr. Plato, did you have a comment?
Getting back to the fire chief's input, the fire chief was present when the township board originally approved the area plan. He did express some concerns about the space between buildings. I think that was considered at the time the board approved the plan. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that with regard to changes to this area plan, what you're approving tonight, this is going to be an exhibit to the development agreement. So this will be, in a sense, the governing document. Now, if there's major changes that have to be made because of, different assessments as we go along, if there are major changes, then they will come back to you for review again and back to the township board. But assuming they're just minor deviations, then this would be the governing document.
I have a question.
The development agreement, so the area plan needs to be a part of the development agreement, right?
It will be, yes.
It will be. In which, so then, my next question is in regards to the utilities. So after we go through this tonight, and the utilities being here, it keeps coming, we're not gonna have to see any of this again until we have a development agreement. I mean, if this were to be approved and have the utilities in place, right? Because there's really, utilities are, where are we with utilities?
Well, the utilities are going along concurrently with this. We do have a contract with Yucca that's ready to be, signed. We have worked with the Great Lakes Water Authority. We have water, public water source available from Great Lakes Water Authority at Napier Road. So that's ready to go. Again, the issue always comes back to how is that going to be funded. Now, we have set up the development agreements, require that the developer pay to bring those utilities into the USD and into their developments. They will have some sort of payback, within those agreements to allow them, as other people tap into those systems, they'll get paid back, that proportionate share. That was required to enlarge, put in expanded pipes to service the USD.
Okay. So we're waiting for Showstack to figure out how to pay for it.
Basically, I'll leave that to Mr. Fisher.
Well, I think there's a lot of moving parts here.
I mean, I know,
Yeah,
I
there's
know
a
that's
lot of-
oversimplifying.
There's a lot of moving parts here, and there's a lot of different sources of sanitary sewer. The easiest one is, as Ed had mentioned, is to deal with the water, because it's right there at the corner, and DWSD/GLWA have that water, and they've agreed to contract the Salem Township for that water supply.
It's at what, it's at where?
It's
located?
right in the corner of Napier, a
Southeast
little
corner.
bit, Napier and Ann Arbor Road. Further down, a little east of Napier Road. So, and that's water is available, and that's the contract between the Salem Township and the Water Authority to provide the water. They just deal with municipalities. Regarding sewer, there's a few different sources that are being considered, and we're running down those different paths. Again, we're not the contracting body. Because of our experience in development, we're trying to assist and bring water, sewer and water to the entire urban service district for use by the entire urban service district as contemplated by the township. So we're working with these different authorities to provide the sanitary sewer. And so depends whether it's through YCUA or GLWA or another source is where it's gonna come from, but that has to be determined.
So what kind of an expectation of a timeline can we have on that?
I was hoping 10 years ago. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. We've been working with the different authorities, and so it's like herding cats in some sense. But it's like I'm not in control of the timeline, so I can't even begin to estimate.
Somebody brought up, Paul, about the access points being directly across from the Plymouth access points. Is that a safety issue that the fire chief would bring up at a later point? Or?
So that's really something the road commissions would be required to weigh in on with their safety standards. I would be interested to know what, so we've had some feedback from Washtenaw County, but we haven't heard anything from Wayne County at this point.
Oh.
I assume the traffic impact study has been sent to them and we're waiting for feedback.
Yes, again, Gary Tressel with Hubbell Roth and Clark, and we've been to Wayne County, and that actually resulted in the southern connection to Napier Road being moved north to not align with the east, on the east side of the road, because they feel it's too close to Ann Arbor Road. And the others, they encourage us to line up across the street so that you have opposing left turns. Okay, if you get offset, then you get conflict.
Okay.
So we've been to Wayne County, and we have been to the road commission, Washtenaw County Road Commission as well.
Okay.
So, and I think in the Washtenaw County Road Commission letter, you'll find they did not take exception to the Gottfredson Road connection.
I definitely agree with the access point on Joey Road there. I know we've discussed that before. The high concentration of homes, that makes sense. I did have a question, Paul. Talked about the consulting with the Plymouth Canton schools. I said we would note that 250 single-family attached detached will generate few school-aged children. How did we come to that conclusion?
Who's noticed that? Who made that statement?
That's in the Carlisle Wortman, page 8.
So I had a conversation with the officials at the school, and I believe that's where that information came from. They have a standard for what they would suggest from any development like this, because they see new developments, so just like trip generation, it would be, I guess, student generation.
Okay.
You know, what they did tell me at the time was they wanted to make sure that when this thing moved forward, that we contacted them about setting up, so that they were aware to put this onto their bus routes.
Okay.
And that they would go through I think this was a question I heard previously, was whether or not they would drive the buses down the private roads, and the indications that they would.
Okay. And then on page, and I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm not. On page 7, under the duplex and detached condominiums, under the provided column for rear, it goes from 20 feet is required, but 10 feet is provided. Was that part of the, perimeter setbacks, that was explained. But this one was not, that one was not addressed.
So this is the rear setbacks for the condominium, the detached condominium.
Right.
That's the orange, right?
Orange and the red.
Says required is 10, provided is, or required is 20, provided is 10.
Bear with me for a moment.
That's the size of it.
So we're the deviations show 10 on this area plan. And unfortunately, I don't have a full-size plan in front of me, and what I'm trying to remember is that all they're showing is 10 here on the leads.
That's correct. Dennis, right here.
Thanks, Ian.
The orange is showing the actual unit itself, it's not showing the piece of property. Is that the way that works? Pieces of property share a line.
Yes. The orange is the building.
The orange is the building itself.
Right. And all the green stuff is steel.
Okay, so,
I'm sorry, I think that may be a typo in our report because it appears that there's clearly more than 20 feet between these lots that back up back to back.
well, I'd say that kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, about having that space to, you know, to play behind the house. Well, we're saying that could be a 20-foot space, whatever a chaise lounge and a umbrella takes up.
So that's in the condominium area,
Yeah,
and
we don't believe that's gonna be so much the kids area.
we expect that the families would be more inclined to be in the single-family residential portion.
Just what are they at? That's the, single family. There's still a 20-foot.
It just needs to be corrected to 20.
You know, it's
It's near your,
Yeah, no change, yeah. This is-
that was near in our report.
Okay, okay. Let's see, then back to page 8. You know, with the natural features and under the impact assessment. Regarding the impact assessment with the following comments, so far we have seen no evidence that the standards set forth in section 60.08D can and will be met. See Woodlands discussion in the next section.
Where are you just reading?
Peach.
Oh, there you go,
Page
halfway
8.
down. Yeah.
Under paragraph,
Yeah, second.
second paragraph in the first.
So, what you're looking at is our updated site plan review for the preliminary site plan. And so subsequent to our last meeting, we were, updating this plan, or updating this report. In the meantime, we received an updated area plan. So we haven't gotten back a full set of plans that reflect the updated area plan, or which have addressed these comments. So
Okay.
the area plan, we recognize, does not address all of these items, but as we've discussed about a number of things, whether it be woodland impacts, the wetland impacts, which I know they were working towards an approval from the DEQ. Stormwater, obviously, we still haven't seen any back and forth with Washtenaw County Water Resources Commissioner. So there are a number of things that will need to be identified and routed through the preliminary site plan. We wanted to provide this in your packet because it's got the details.
Okay.
As far as numbers and density, et cetera.
part that really came out of the previous area plan, if you might.
I know there's some repeats and
You might
whatnot.
recall that there was considerable concern at the commission and concern that we raised about the intrusion of the two cul-de-sacs that went up into the major wooded area of this site. You know, in going back in reviewing that area plan against the preliminary plan that we had at the time that did have the tree survey, this is an area where there was some of the most significant upland hardwoods on the site, both in size and quality. And, and in, you know, in the type of tree too, frankly. And, you know, in sitting down with the applicant and their engineer, you know, we expressed that concern and pointed this out, and that's why you end up with the revised area plan. I mean, I think that, you know, remains to be seen until we get the preliminary site plan, but the fact is that this substantially more trees are gonna be saved as a result of this plan than what was previously presented as the area plan.
And I agree, staying out of those hardwoods was a significant improvement. I just, in the report, sometimes it gets confusing that we
Well,
talk about these things, where they actually address, so I just wanted to clarify before we start moving forward, so. I think that is all the questions. Deanne has a question, sorry.
I just had the question about the phasing. Does that happen upstream? Is that, in other words, a phasing process? Okay.
Yes.
Just-
There'll be language in the development agreement that speaks to how phases are going to have to be resolved in a manner that stand alone, so to speak, so that each phase can be supported, but, you know, it's very difficult to right now to determine where this project starts from a phasing standpoint until we know what direction the utilities are coming from.
That's reasonable. Is this document that we got tonight, including what's in here, the 11-4 document, 11-4-16 document that Pam's been reading from just now?
Well,
So, no, this
Separate.
document is a draft resolution, which would be a resolution of findings and a recommendation to the board. So in the zoning ordinance, there are these 11 findings from section 50.102C that the planning commission is supposed to go through to use as their kind of basis for making a determination about an area plan rezone. So since we're back to discussing a change, you know, of this area plan, then you should go through these and make a determination if you find that they have dealt with these items appropriately, or you may need to place conditions on your approval that certain things would be dealt with during the subsequent planning process.
In your opinion, your professional opinion, does this take care of this stuff? I realize this is more comprehensive, maybe trying to take into all the projections.
This takes care of these 11 findings. The items that are in the report are more specific to preliminary site plan issues. So, you know, basically, we put forth some suggestions regarding these findings and a number of suggested conditions that the board could include in their ultimate approval resolution to ensure that some of these items get dealt with during the preliminary planning process, preliminary site planning process. Does that make sense? I hope I'm being.
Vaguely.
He's given us the problems and he's picked out the tools that we need to use to solve them.
Yeah, right, I realize that. I'm just worried about all these.
So this is very
Fine
much the
on
same
this.
as the draft that was placed in your packet.
okay,
There are a couple of editorial changes.
anything you'd like to discuss?
Well, this- I think what Ms. Paul's saying, this is, the resolution is general, you know, it requires them to comply with our ordinances and that type of thing.
Yep.
If you get down to specifics that you want to see in the area plan, such as a discussion of Joy Road, that's going to have to be addressed by the planning commission. I mean, the planners can't make that
So
decision.
you're saying we
before
have to vote on that tonight then?
You have to vote, if you want that included as a condition of the area plan, you have to vote on that.
Okay, so we couldn't agree.
So what I would,
Well, I think we need to include the Joy Road
Yeah,
access.
well, that's part of this.
Okay, okay.
So what I would suggest is you actually kind of go through each of these findings.
Okay.
And you could do that as a
Let's get
board,
started.
discuss
On this?
it, yep.
Yep,
And
all right, let's
determine
get
if you
started.
agree with what our
Set 'em up,
suggestions
knock
are.
'em down, wrong height.
And
Okay.
then at the very end, there are some suggested conditions. You can add or detract from those as you like.
Okay, so,
May I make a brief comment? Is this the time or?
a brief comment, did you say?
Yes,
Okay,
I'll
yeah.
make a brief comment. I'd like to start out and thank Dick and Paul for all the hard work they put into this. I think I mentioned in our October meeting that we submitted plans, the preliminary site plan, and the township had asked us if they could take a second look at it because they were new planners at the time. And we sat down with them, and I think we had 4 very productive, intense work sessions throughout the course of the summer. And I think there were some very, very good suggestions that were made, and we incorporated virtually all those suggestions. And they put a lot of time and effort into it, and I thank them, and I thank them for their comments, and I think we had a good back and forth discussion on those issues. When I was here in October, the issue was whether or not there was major or minor amendments made to the plan. And not for a second was I questioning the professionalism of either Dick or Paul, but just questioning the decision. In my opinion, I thought they were relatively minor decisions, they thought they were major. Ultimately, this commission voted on it and found that they were major, and that's why we're here today. What was also asked at that time by this commission is that between the October meeting and the meeting today, that I go back and sit down again with Dick and Paul, which I did. And we sat down and we went over the changes, and we made some of the changes they made, including, as was noted, was bringing the cul-de-sacs down, eliminating the cul-de-sacs basically to save all those trees, and we made those changes. One thing though I'd like to highlight, because I've heard a lot of discussion on this, and that's about the road commission's concepts here. As Paul mentioned, the road commission agreed with our trip generation methodology. They said what we did was right, they agreed with our traffic engineer. We have a person who is trained as a traffic engineer to make these, put together this analysis and present it before them, and they agreed with our professional on that. It was said by someone on the commission here today, I think a couple people today, that there's a lot of emotion when it comes to traffic. By the commission's requirements, we have to build the roads to the same standards after the development as they were before the development, and we have every intention to. The next question becomes the southern access. As I mentioned, the road commission agreed with our trip generation methodology, and we designed the 3 access points in Napier and the one at Gottfriedson to address that analysis. They have not required, again, they have not required that we have a southern access there. And we believe that this is sufficient, and they'll ultimately give us the approval that's needed when we go through the final engineering to access these points. But as far as the southern access point, they are not requiring that at all.
Okay, thank you.
That was Washington County.
Yes, yes, they have the Wayne County has the jurisdiction on Napier Road, Washington County has the jurisdiction on the rest.
Mark, did you get this one?
Yes.
Okay.
And one example is Northville Ridge, which is just up the road here. They have almost 800 sites. They have 2 access points, one on 6 Mile, one on the unpaved portion of Ridge Road. We have 4 by comparison with over 300 site plans.
That's in
Thank you. Okay, so going through these recommendations for approval, should we read, would you want me to read the whole thing, or how do we go about this?
Make sure we have the correct one, okay? Those,
It's 1121.
yes.
I stand corrected. Earlier I said, for example, I used an example of the road access. That actually is included in the resolution.
Oh,
In this
It
resolution?
is, it's number 2 under condition.
But the road commission did recommend that there be an exit.
Yes.
okay. And the fire chief was concerned that there are no,
Access.
there's not a north, or south, and the north is not an option, correct?
I'm sorry,
I don't think he's given us an easement.
Okay, so to go through these recommendations of approvals, how do you suggest that this works?
So there are 11 standards that you want to look at. So just, for the purpose of the record, you could read the standard and then the
Okay.
suggestion and see if everyone agrees with it or if you want to add anything to it.
Okay,
Just take them each one at a time and ask the rest of the
okay.
Excuse me, point of
Okay, so,
clarification,
um,
which, I've got two resolutions. There was one that was the latest version.
The latest version is,
How
has
is
a draft date of 11/21.
down in the right-hand corner, 11/21?
Yeah, it's up above.
There's one that says 521.
Yeah, both of these, the first page says 531, the
Yep.
second page says 1121.
The second page, that, for whatever reason, that footer on the first page, one that you got is not corrected. The planning commission has the exact same thing.
It was a
Oh,
test.
okay, so it says draft, there says 1121?
Yes.
Okay, because I have one 1121 and 1118.
Here's your new copy.
Not that one, it's got those on it.
You should have two in here, right?
Yeah, sorry.
They both said 531. The second page is 1121, this is 1118. This is the one that we're on.
It's up a ridge and what's Okay,
Pam,
yes.
this is Local, it's Wayne County.
Don't even talk, we're,
Okay.
Washington County is different than Wayne County for many good reasons.
Okay.
About the access point, it does not necessarily have to be where this outline is shown. I think what we're suggesting is that it's appropriate to have a southern access point. I think that's what the fire marshal is suggesting as well. And the road commission, as they work through this, will work with them on the details. If they think there's a more appropriate southern access point, if the developer does, they can certainly propose that. And they can work with the road commission as they move forward to ultimately accept their traffic impact study and then determine what the appropriate improvements are or necessary improvements are based on. So the original area plan showed one coming out on Ann Arbor Road, this one's coming out on Joy Road. It's not for us to say what the road commission would require in terms
Sure.
of improvement. So I guess what we would suggest is that they provide an access point and work with the road commission on the details.
Exactly, and I totally understand that.
And that's really what this is what the resolution is. It provides the opportunity for alternative locations to be presented.
Sure.
Okay?
Will public safety and the fire department have say in that?
Okay. Oh, Dan's gone. All right. Okay, so, let's just take a 3-minute recess. 35-minute recess, everybody can stretch their legs and wait till we pull ourselves